Hey, good morning. It's Juan at PSL, and I want to talk to you about the mean streets. Being a cop in New York was fantastic. No disrespect to any of the victims I ran across, and nothing like that. This is not about that. This is talking about how, as a cop in the Bronx, you didn't come out to work hoping that something would happen. Something was definitely going to happen. Now, whether you were there, a block away, a mile away, it didn't matter. Something was going to happen. Working with great partners, having the support of Road Patrol. Road Patrol was big for us also. If we needed backup, a lot of times we didn't because I worked in a team concept, minimum 2 officers and up to, 8, 10 officers at times. So when you work in a group like that, there is no 85s or 13s or anything like that. But if you're working as a two-man team, you still need the assistance of Road Patrol. Road Patrol was big because after it was established that me and my team were go-getters out there hustling, running, chasing, investigating, doing all the things that anti-crime cops do all over the place. I'm not taking credit for it. I'm sure there was thousands of officers across this country, if not more, that did the same thing. I just had the opportunity to work in the mean streets. And the mean streets always provide. There's always an innocent victim. There's always people minding their business, going to work, coming back, going grocery shopping, whatever. Your normal day-to-day affairs were affected in the mean streets. And because of this, I was a very active cop. I stopped guesstimating over 30,000 stops. I stopped because it was that many stops that I made. Now, obviously, in a team concept, I didn't take all the collars. I worked in a team. You cooperate with your team members, they cooperate with you. Sometimes they had something to do the next day, doctor's appointment, date night with the wife, whatever. So we understood that they were not catching that night. But the rest of us that were catching, we worked in the right environment. I feel a little guilty saying that because that means there was a lot of victims out there. But whether I was out there or not, there was going to be a lot of victims. If you can reconcile with that, there was going to be a lot of victims out there. I just tried to even the odds a little bit, where if they got away with, 15, 20 robberies, and I can catch them on one, and get them indicted or at least put them through the system, and then it's up to the DA if they're going to prosecute or not. You don't control that as a plainclothes cop, and then later as a detective. You don't control that. Your job is to help clear up numbers, whether the numbers are known, like prior cases that you're investigating, or the numbers are happening. If the numbers are happening, you're out there. It's gonna happen, and you're gonna be looking and searching and going into the projects and going into the subway stations, and you're looking. The slowest time you probably have is on a stakeout because you're kind of confined. You know, a crime, a lower level crime that you might normally take on an everyday assignment, you don't take on a stakeout. You're there for a reason. You're there for something high profile, people getting mugged, stabbed, shot, whatever. You're there for that. So if somebody lights up a joint next to you, normally you would take action, but you're not doing that. You're not there for that. So those were a little trying times that we were used to grab everything because everybody had a warrant. I worked in the 80s when people got summonses and threw them out, sometimes right in front of you. They threw the summons out right in front of you. And if you were, you smiled and you said, people don't get, people that commit lower level crimes and are okay with doing it, hopping the train, smoking the marijuana, smoking the cigarette, drinking the beer, drinking a 40, having the boombox blaring, all those things are minor crimes. All those things can get you a summons. The marijuana in public view could have been, it was a misdemeanor. So you had different options there. But I'm just saying a lot of low level um, um, violations of the subway later become warrants. So now in the future, a couple of months later, a year, doesn't matter, whatever the time period, you stop this person for another misdemeanor, except this time you have orders to run everybody through a warrant check. You run them through a warrant check and the warrant pops out. That little nonsense, low level violation that they could have taken care of if they wanted to. But the mentality was, I ain't paying that ticket. That was the mentality. I don't care if you got me dead to rights, I ain't paying that ticket. So, as a cop, you got to learn not to be upset about that. That's just the way they are. And by they, I just mean people, Not everybody, I recognize not everybody that got a ticket was a bad person. I'm a firm believer that I met a lot of good people that were just having a bad day. I met a lot of good people that stayed at the club too long, or they stayed at the bar too long, and now they're stumbling their way onto the subway to get home. And then they light up that cigarette, or they finish that beer that they had in their pocket, or whatever low-level violation was committed, and then I saw them. I acted on it. It was my job to act on it. I wasn't picking on anybody. But then again, I tell everybody, I worked midnights most of my careers. I did do some APs. I did do a noon to 8 for about 3 years. So, but mostly I did the midnight shift. I just liked the steadiness of the tour. There was always going to be action on your tour. I remember when we had to do FTO and the rookies came out, and sometimes in my unit they would give us, 10, 12 rookies to go on train patrol with. And you could see some of them were like itching. Oh, I can't wait to get involved in something. I was like, dude, calm down. Calm down. It's gonna come, but you don't want to be hyper before it comes. Try to practice being a relaxed, calm person before the incident. And then during and after the incident, if you have to elevate your blood pressure because of whatever feedback you're getting, then you address it. But don't practice being hyped before anything happens. I think there's something physically wrong about that, mentally wrong about that. You have to be the most calmest person on the situation. I used to look at some other officers, and they used to blow minor stuff out of proportion. So I used to say to myself, if I had to train that officer, I would train him calm, we call it today de-escalate. De-escalate. The guy throws a swing, the guy charges at you, that's a different story. Then you're fine to be as hyper as you want to be. Still under control, but you're allowed to be hyper. But I don't think you should be hyper before the stop. I just think there's something that can lead to disaster. My personal opinion, of course, Whatever you did in your career, that's fine. That's your way, that's fine. It got you this far, that's fine. You didn't get as much troubles you should have, that's fine. All of us have gone through that bridge where we could have got in trouble, um, but we didn't, or we got, to smooth it out, or whatever good term you want to use. So I'm not playing, um, I am better than anybody else. I'm not playing that card. I just know as a seasoned officer, and I was seasoned way ahead of my time. I was seasoned. I came on the job not knowing how people cock the turnstile to get on the subway. There's not too many people that can say that. Because I didn't use the subways. When I was, through high school, I didn't use the subways. It wasn't until I got to go to college that I used the subway, and that wasn't long. But I mean, I'm just saying, there was a lot more street smart people, if you want to call knowing how to cock the turnstile, go to the exit booth, all those things are street smart. There was a lot more street smart people than me. But I'm also stating, once I learned the job, once I got through the academy, because even the academy, I was kind of like not the, I'm not gonna say sharpest, because I'm very smart, but I'm not saying sharpest as far as, I'm saying sharpest as far as street smarts. I just didn't do it. I was more on the nerd side than I was the street smart side. But once I became a cop, and once I got on FTO, I was absorbing everything. I was absorbing everything the FTO told me, and I was absorbing everything I saw. And then I absorbed talking to people because they were victims, and I absorbed talking to people because they were perps or just minor rule violators. There is a difference how you talk to people. Like I said, a lot of good people out there, sometimes they were just having a bad day. They were just having a bad day, and you happen to stop them on that day. Any other day of the week, maybe they were a fine, upstanding person, honorable, good provider, family person, all the good words you want to use in conjunction with that. Unfortunately, on the midnights, if you were a working person, unless you work the midnights or unless you're going to work at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, I was out there. And I just make sure that I address crime, and I enjoy addressing crime. I thought that was the biggest service I can do my community. I think maybe in my career I ran into two people that knew me. So I guess 99.8% of the people, if I'm making up a figure here, I didn't know them. I was helping total strangers. I was helping total strangers get medical care. I was helping total strangers trying to recover their property. I was helping total strangers by addressing whoever beat them up, robbed them, stabbed them, shot them, whatever category happened to be that day. I addressed that, and I was proud to do it. I I if sometimes as you get older and your career is dwindling down and you're going into retirement or you are in retirement, sometimes you may look back and you say to yourself, what could I have done differently? What career could I have done differently? And I do have some regret of not picking the right Marine Corps assignment. I scored so well on the entrance exam that they offered me all the way up to the air traffic controller, and I didn't pick it. I'm an 18-year-old kid, 1 year at St. John's. I'm bummed out. I can't be on the baseball team because there's like 70 other people on the field, and they all have better scholarships than me, and they all have better resumes than me. I went into college thinking I was a hot shot ball player, and I show up on the field and there's 70 to 80 guys there. And the coach looks at you and goes, dude, you know, if you get to play, it won't be to your junior year. That bummed me out. Next thing you know, I joined the Marine Corps. I maxed the test, like I said earlier. They said, what do you want? And I'm standing there going, as an 18-year-old kid going, I don't know what I want. Okay, well, we'll make you a mechanic. The least thing that I knew in this world was being a mechanic. The least. I could probably tell you the biggest part of the front of the car was the engine. That was it. You start asking me about carburetors and injection systems, injector systems, and anything, flywheels and all this other stuff. I didn't have a clue. At that time, I didn't have a clue. Now I went to mechanic school and I learned, and I still wouldn't fix my own car, but I did learn. That's just me. That's my personal preference. I find a good mechanic and I stick with them. I trust in their craft. Well, my craft was being a police officer, and the subdivision of that was being an anti-crime police officer, and then later a detective. Anti-crime detective, if you want to call it. I know it's different parts of the states. It's called differently. But my point is, I found what I was good at. I was very happy. Had to do it all again, I still would pick it in the same sequence too. So I know some guys regretted that they took the transit test because they really wanted to be NYPD. Hey, more power to you. There's no personal animosity here. I took the transit test because I didn't have a clue what a cop was or did, other than seeing them occasionally in the streets, but there was no relation. There was no relation. It's not like in my days, in my neighborhood, you just didn't walk up to a cop and start talking. You avoided whatever conversation you had with the cop unless he was addressing you, and then you couldn't avoid it. So that's the mentality that we had back then. Not because we were bad people. I told you already. I was more on the nerd side than anything else. You talk to me about sports, and you talk to me about school, and I can talk to you all day. You talk to me about boosting cars and robbing people. That wasn't my conversation. I didn't want to have that conversation. I wasn't going to be good at it anyway. That's not what I did. But once I became a cop, man, did I find a career. I had the extra motivation of being married young, being a parent young. So this wasn't a job for me to play with. This was a job that provided my income. I thank the city of New York. I thank my employer. We all have up and downs in our career. That's just part of the way things go. If you see some of my other videos, I covered that in a couple of videos. But this video is working the mean streets. Wow, what an honor it was to work New York. What an honor it was to help out my fellow citizens. I feel glad that I helped so many people. I feel glad that I was able to make so many arrests along with my team members. Most of what I'm talking about, I'm also referring to my team members, even though I may not say it all the time. The team members I work with were awesome. We made sure we got home every night, and we made sure if you had an arrest that we helped you process, then we helped you get something to eat, and then we helped you get some rest. We figured out some ways where we can rest an hour here and an hour there and still be able to see the assistant district attorney when they called your name. All those things were like fantastic. It made your career that much better. I was one of the few people that I know did not want to retire after 20 years. I was having a blast. I did not want to retire. I was working anti-crime. I was in plain clothes, and I think I had weekends off steady. So I had everything good. I'm living some cop's dream. That was me. I was living their dream for like over 15 years. The last thing I wanted to do was retire. So mentally, I was forced to retire because NYPD, they had that policy that if something went wrong around you, the job went after your job, after your pension. That was one of the cruelest things about being an NYPD cop. The cruelest. I'm talking about something that you were not involved with, but you were in the area of, or you were in the same unit of, or you were in the same building of, or you were, anything vague like that. Somebody else did something. And you were investigated as much as the other person. And if they found out that you had 15, 20 years on the job, they went after your pension. And I seen this happen several times, and I did not want that to be me. I was lucky. I didn't, I got involved in a lot of stuff. The least I should tell you that I didn't. I got involved in a lot of stuff. But internal affairs, when I was transit, they investigated the guilty party. Maybe his partner, well, definitely his partner, but not the whole building. As far as I know, not the whole building. Not the person that was in the unit but was home. Not that kind of investigation. The people that did something and they did something wrong, I was okay with it being investigated because, they give cops a black eye, and cops, we have a black eye as it is. That's another thing you learn in your career. You're not going to change people's mentality about you no matter how nice you are. And being an anti-crime officer, you're not really being nice if you're grabbing everybody for committing violations. And by grabbing, I mean, giving summonses, making misdemeanor arrests, making felony arrests. That's what I mean by grabbing. So it's hard for you to advertise yourself as a good person, even though you are. I believe you are. I believe I was. But for a total stranger to look at me and see me stopping somebody that all he did was smoke a joint and carry a 40 and play his boombox, that's all he did, according to them. Well, those are transit violations. Those were enough for me to get involved. That was my job to get involved. It wasn't my job to keep you happy that I overlooked this, because there's always going to be other people that are going to say, officer, you were standing right there while this guy was smoking a joint. Officer, you were standing right there while this guy hopped the train. Officer, you were right there when he was blaring his beat bop. So I had a job to do. So being a good person, I did my job. What other people consider you, well, you deal with it. Some people understand, especially if they were a victim of crime. All of a sudden, they understand. They understand that you're needed out there. And I was needed out there. Every day I went out there, I felt I was needed. Because every day I went out there, there was crime happening. I said in a previous video, I met a lot of criminals that were track stars. I met a lot of criminals that slept during the day and they came out at night hunting. They were hunting for victims. We were hunting for criminals. They were hunting for victims. That's the effect that we had on each other. And if they ran into you and you were the victim, and I saw it and I took action, you may change your opinion about me. You may say, you know, that officer is a good officer. I know what you saw on TV. I know what you hear from other people, you know, especially the ones that got the nonsense summonses for urinating at the end of the platform or urinating between cars, and they seem to think that was okay. I made a video about that if you want to research that. I just, you know, I was a good person. I am a good person. I continue my career in Florida, which is a separate video. I'm just giving you, working the mean streets was big. It's something that I could do tomorrow. That's how much I enjoyed it. I know more cops than not that don't want no part of law enforcement after they did their 20, 25 years. They want no part of it. I'm done. I did my time. It's almost like you did the jail time next to the perk. I did my time. I'm out of here. You know, I left New York for the weather and the economy, paying 4 taxes and freezing 8 months of the year. You know, when you were young, you can tolerate all that stuff. You know, you work your 3 jobs to make ends meet. All that stuff was normal. I come to Florida, great weather, you know, 9, 10 months of the year, if not more. No state tax. There's one less tax you pay. Just federal tax on your salary if you're lucky enough to get a job down here. A lot of positives working in Florida, and that's another video I did. You should check into it. I mentioned don't come down here without your benefits. Dude, it's a rude awakening. Don't come down here without your benefits. Lock in your benefits. If your job has a 20-year pension plan, 25-year pension plan, do the years. Suffer through the years. I suffered through my years. Suffer through them. But lock in those benefits, because those benefits are huge. Huge. And so back to the mean streets. A lot of projects, a lot of urban areas. New York has a lot of rich areas, but they have a lot of Section 8 projects, low-income neighborhoods, if they're not projects, if they're tenements. Whatever the good word is, they have them. All a source of crime. You know, I used to feel sorry for the road patrol guys that had this, they call sector cars. Sector cars could go back on a job 3 times. They go break up a fight. They separate everybody. Nobody's hurt. Get away from each other. Yes, sir, officer, okay. They didn't say sir, but yes. Also, they walk away if they said that. And then, you know, an hour later, you get another call. They're back at it. And then you go back. And you take one guy and you force him down the block, especially if he didn't live there. Get away from the situation so that I can continue helping other people. And then if you came back a 3rd time, you're like, somebody's got to go to jail. Who keeps coming back here and reigniting this feud? Whether it was a domestic, whether it was neighbors, whether it was, you know, those are all tough calls. You know, because you can see yourself in some of those calls in your personal life. You can see you getting mad once in a while over whatever a neighbor did or whatever music they're blaring at 2 in the morning and you're trying to sleep because you got to get up first thing in the morning. You can see that. You can see why that guy's upset. But that doesn't change the fact that you can't go next door with a baseball bat and bash his head in. Or you can't, you know, pick up a tire iron over a parking spot. You know, I can see you're being upset, but I can't justify it as a law enforcement officer. I can't justify it. I can't say you did the right thing. I have to take you in. You cause bodily harm, I have to take you in. You know, because then I'm liable. I failed to act on my duties. And a lot of citizens miss that fact. It's called malfeasance. You have to do your job. You are given a level of where you can make a decision. It'll come to me. But discretion. You are given a level of discretion, but some crimes, that discretion's out the window. Guy sitting there with his head bashed in, he's shot, he's stabbed, you broke his ribs with the bat. There's no discretion there. He has to go get medical aid, and you have to go to jail. Now, what you work out with your attorney and the state attorney, that's your business. You get away with it, hey, more power to you. It ain't my job to see this through. It's my job to gather whatever evidence I can get is available, and if not, pass it forward to the detective, make the arrest, bring it in, testify to the assistant district attorney, as they were called in New York. I realize in other places they call different. In Florida, they call assistant state attorneys. I covered that in another video. But my point is, I love my job. Working the mean streets was busy, always action, always something going on. My heart used to go out to a lot of victims. I felt bad for them. And, if they didn't put themselves in that situation, though, there were times personally where I said to myself, you left New Jersey to come to Times Square and buy drugs, and you got ripped off. And now you walked up to me as a police officer and complained about the guy that ripped you off because you left New Jersey to come here and buy drugs. I had that call. I had that call a couple of times. And I had to stay there with a straight face and go, you're telling me you left the safe confines of your neighborhood in a different state, and you decided it was a good idea to come cop drugs at Times Square where nobody lives. That was another thing that I said most of my career. Nobody lives at Times Square. You commute through it, you travel through it, same thing, commute, but you visit. And in those days, there was only the X-rated peep shows and the karate films and maybe the Black Power movies that I was fond of. That was it. That was it. I called it Times Square was dark in the daytime. That's what I called it. There was this dark cloud over Times Square. So if you went to Times Square and then you complained about being a victim, I didn't say it to your face, but I thought it. As somebody that grew up in New York City, I didn't go to Times Square for anything. There was nothing at Times Square that I couldn't get locally. I didn't have the money to be that adventuresome and go spend money. So that might have been another factor there. But the point is, I live here and I don't come to Times Square. I'm only here because I work here. Well, that's my assignment. That's why I'm here. So I ran into people like that. And then you run into your truly, victims that did nothing wrong except leave their house to go to work or leave the bar too late, like I mentioned earlier. Those people I really felt sorry for, because these young guys that slept all day, and then when you go to chase them, they can run a mile faster than you can. They're full of energy. They're all amped up. All that energy that I talked about before, they have it because they come out hunting. Their day relies on you being drunk on the subway, drunk on the bus, falling asleep, laying on a stoop, on a concrete stoop, going to a bodega at 2 o'clock in the morning to get something to drink. They rely on you. You're their customer. You're their, and not customer in a good way. You're their future victim. Their night relies on being able to snatch somebody's chain, or grab your purse, or stick a weapon at you and declare a robbery. Their night depends on that. You just made their night. So I did have a problem with people that did that, and I made it my mission to get as many as I could. Obviously, I couldn't get everybody. Obviously, there's thousands of more people, maybe a day, a week, that got away with it. But if I was involved, my team was involved, we try to do something about it, and I feel really good about that. I can relate to a lot of my coworkers because of that, because we were all mostly on the same page. We had a good combination of A+ personalities in our team, so we worked it out. I wasn't always in charge. I had to remember that, but I worked with enough people that we were good teammates, and everything was good. Working anti-crime was beautiful. I like I said, I could do it today. That's how much of a good time I did. If they wouldn't have mentally forced me, there was nobody standing there going, "You better retire." But you look at your surroundings and you see how they go after some people's pensions that were not guilty. If you went after somebody's pension and he was guilty, well, that's between him and his attorney. I'm not getting involved in that. I kept out of that. But I'm talking about a good cop that did his job and now is playing Russian roulette with his pension. That's not fair to your family. That's not fair to you. You don't want your 20 years of service to go down the drain, because I didn't realize this till later on. I probably could have done 25 years, gotten a much better pension, because I had all these years with zeros because of our famous mayor. He kept giving us zeros for contracts for like 6 years. So if I would have stayed 25 years, it would have been to my benefit financially, and because later on, eventually, under a different mayor, they did get a raise, and it wasn't until they suffer embarrassment in the media saying some rookie cops, their salary was so low they qualified for food stamps. I remember seeing headlines for that after I retired. And I remember saying, that's very embarrassing for an honorable career. Honorable career. These guys that are starting qualify for food stamps. So I do thank you for staying this long in the video. I appreciate the time. It's a new channel, so I'm working on things. There's going to be a blooper here and there. I hope you have a sense of humor about it. I have to learn how to edit. So there's a lot of things in my future, but I'm glad to put these videos out. Like and subscribe, and I'm glad you stood this long. Thank you for your time. One in PSL.